Hello and welcome to this demo in InDesign where I'm going to be showing you guys the concept of grid layouts. In graphic design and in layouts in general, we sometimes use a formula or tool that is referred to as a grid, and it helps us line things up and keep even spaces, and also helps us when we're doing our layouts so that things don't get too crowded. So how do I do a grid layout? Well, it's a simple tool where I go up in InDesign to my top menu. I go to View, Grids and Guides, and Show Document Grid. And a little grid is going to show up for this. Now, with this grid and all these lines, it allows me to place things in a layout using these lines to line things up with. So, for example, if I wanted to draw just a box of some kind, let's create us a layer. And if I wanted that box to fill this much space, see how I use the grid lines to determine the space between the margin, which is what this pink line is, and the lines of the grid, and how I could adjust this to line up to either the bold lines of the grid, or I can use it to adjust it so that it lines up to the small little squares of the grid. And see how it kind of lines up to all those lines on the little squares as well. So when we do grid layouts, you'll see that we use these to sometimes help align things and create different shapes for our layouts, but also it helps us create the negative space that we may need in between things. So if I wanted these all to be a grid in between them all, then I can use my grid, the little squares on my grid, to line everything up with. And so now these are 2 apart and these are 1 apart. Now, I don't want you to confuse grid layouts with columns. That's going to be a totally different thing. But I could use this if I wanted to expand this and center it a little bit more. Then see how it's now centered, where it's like I've got 1 solid square unit, 1 solid square unit, 2 grids over. And I can scoot this guy 2 grids over if I want to balance it out a little bit more. And so I just use these lines to line everything up. And so that's what we're talking about when we say we use grid layouts to line things up in our design.